Okay, so this question is asking about advantages and disadvantages, and it's asking specifically, do the advantages of this outweigh the disadvantages? Okay, so again, this is asking you to give your opinion. Should probably discuss both sides, both advantages and disadvantages, but what you need to come to a conclusion about is which are more important, the advantages or the disadvantages. So it's asking you to do some kind of evaluation skill. Okay, so reach some judgment about which is better. And the subject is about learning a foreign language. So should students begin learning a foreign language in primary school rather than secondary school? So when we start with the introduction, some specialists advocate that to start learning a second language as a primary school student is the so I saw this wrong, is more effective than as a secondary school student. So this is a comparison sentence that the student's trying to make. So because you're comparing, because you've got the word more here, you've got to have than, more than. So more effective than as a secondary school student. So because it's the comparison, you need to have the than in there to make it make sense. So that's a grammar issue that the student should probably check. Do they understand how to make comparison sentences? While the claim is reasonable, there are indeed some minor flaws as well. Okay, so they're giving me a judgment. So because they said indeed some minor flaws as well, I can see that their opinion is going to be that they think the disadvantages are more serious. This essay will elucidate why the benefit overpowers the downside. So overpowers isn't really the correct type of formal language. I would say this is too informal for an academic argumentative essay. And so I would ask the student to change this out for a more formal way, why the benefit outweighs the downside, why the benefit overcomes the downside, or why the benefit is more important than, would be better, or brings more advantages than the downside, could be another way to do it, but overpowers is kind of an informal way to say it. Okay, so then my issue here is that these two sentences, I think they disagree with each other. While the claim is reasonable, there are indeed some minor flaws as well. Okay, so while some students should learn a foreign language at school, there are some problems. Okay, and then this essay will explain why the benefits overcome the downside. So the first sentence here is giving me the hint that this essay is going to talk about the disadvantages. Okay, that the author thinks that the disadvantages are serious. But then in the second sentence, they're saying that the benefits overpower the downside. So when I read this introduction, I'm not clear. What is your argument? Are you saying that the advantages outweigh the disadvantage or the other way around? Because these two sentences are giving me a different feeling about what your overall argument is going to be. So it's slightly confusing for me as a reader. So I would either change this sentence or the second sentence. An easy way to change it would just be to swap downside and benefits over, and then it would be consistent. The only other feedback I would give would be to give me a hint of the subtopics you're going to talk about. So you say minor flaws here. You can be specific. What minor flaws will you talk about? Okay, so you could say something like, while the claim is reasonable, the disadvantages for learning your mother language are also an issue that need to be considered. Okay, so then I know, okay, in one of the paragraphs, you're going to talk about the problems of learning a second language before you fully learned your first language. So that's going to really help you with the task completion and coherence, because you've told me in your introduction, what's your opinion? What are the two pieces of evidence you're going to talk about? What are going to be the 2 points of your argument? And then the rest of the essay should be following the structure you've laid out in your introduction. So that's how you get a better coherence score, because you logically follow through the essay. So after I read your introduction, I should know what's your opinion. I should know what the 2 paragraphs in the essay will talk about. That's how you get a better task completion, because your argument can logically follow through the whole essay. So when we get to the first paragraph, so they talk about one of the foremost drawbacks of introducing a foreign language in primary school rather than later on is in fact the higher chance of forgetting what students learned when they grow up. Okay? So this is a confusingly structured part of the sentence. Okay? So the chance of forgetting, so who are you talking about? Okay, there's no subject here. So the subject has come over here. So the higher chance of students forgetting what they learned when they grow up. Okay, so the sentence should be structured like that, because otherwise I have to read it twice to go back and check what I think you're trying to say. And if the examiner has to go back and read it twice, it means that your grammar and your sentences are not clear, and that's going to affect your score. To elaborate more, unless individuals continue practicing the language, in all likelihood they will barely recall any. Okay, so here I would say you need to give an example and you need to extend this argument. Okay, they will barely recall any. So my question is, why? Okay, why would they not recall any? So you learn something in primary school. You don't forget everything you learned in primary school. I learned to read in primary school. You don't forget when you learn how to read. So this needs to be explained more. So I would say you would have to be more specific. So you could say, for example, unless Indians can be read, in all likelihood, they will barely recall any. So say, for example, many Korean high school students begin learning English in elementary school, but because they never get a chance to practice speaking English, often their language skills are not good when they reach university. Okay, so I would want you to extend that with a specific example. Another way you can include good evidence into your answer is to make up some kind of study, because the examiner doesn't know if you're lying or not. So you can say, they will barely recall any. You can say something like, a study by UCL found that, and then you can make up some statistics, found that 80% of people who learned a language in primary school but didn't continue in high school forgot everything that they learned. Okay? So that's how you support your argument and you develop your point more, by using specific examples to support the point that you're making. Because otherwise, this is just your opinion. In all likelihood, they will barely recall any. Your opinion is not as good as an opinion supported with some evidence. So that's how you extend and support your answers more. Then we move on to another negative aspect is the risk of creating confusion for some children. It is because the young have not yet mastered the primary language. So this is not a very clear way of saying this. Have not mastered their primary language, or you could also paraphrase to not master their mother tongue or their first language, would be a better way to phrase that. So hence, teaching multiple languages could be overwhelming. Okay, so the conclusion of this essay, when we skip forward to the end, the person is actually supposed to be arguing that the advantage is better than the disadvantage. So when I got to the conclusion, I was surprised, because when I read this paragraph, it sounds like learning a language in primary school is really terrible and people shouldn't do it. So, but that's not actually the argument of what the person is going to say. So what they need to do is they need to extend here, add just 1 or 2 more sentences where they explain why they disagree with this, or why this problem isn't serious. Okay, so you need to provide your counter argument to this, because the overall point of your essay is saying that there are more advantages to learning a foreign language in primary school than not. That's what this person has chosen to argue and what their conclusion says. So what they need to follow up here with is something that you need to tell me why this isn't a serious problem. So you could even add something that says something like, Hence, that teaching multiple languages could be overwhelming. However, there have been many studies, for example, by Harvard University, that found out that students who learn languages in primary school have a more positive view of foreigners and are more peaceful and diplomatic or something like that, where you then explain, okay, so there are some negative points, but there are also some positive points to it, because overall, you have to focus on what your overall argument is. And because you're talking about whether the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, you don't need to be balanced and fair. They're asking you to make a judgment and evaluate. Okay, so what this person needs to do for their task completion is to evaluate the point that they made here and explain why they think it's not so serious and why they disagree with this overall in their conclusion. So then we move on to, regardless of these possible side effects, educating a language. So a teacher educates a student, but what they're doing here is they're learning a language, or being exposed to a language would be another good paraphrase here. Besides the national one, before secondary school has undeniable benefits as well. For instance, it enables one to be bilingual. So bilingual is a good specific use of vocabulary here. Achieving a high level of foreign language that is close to native speakers. Should be plural. It is because this is because the younger individuals, the faster, the easier to absorb the new language and make them theirs. So this is a confusing sentence here, mainly because of this here. The faster, the easier to absorb doesn't make sense. That's not how we structure a sentence. This is because younger individuals, so we get rid of that, younger individuals absorb the new language, and it should be faster and easier, should go after that. Absorb the new language faster and easier and make them theirs. This has got for me, this has got an unclear meaning. What do you mean make them theirs? So the student should think about what were they trying to say, and is there a way that they can explain it that makes it clearer to me what their meaning is? For example, the notable gap of speaking ability exists in immigrants, it's an adjective, immigrant families. It's not just one, you're talking about all families, between the parents and their children, underpinning the point. Furthermore, speaking varying, so again, adjective, various languages contributes, with an S, to children's brain development, the language department. So this is a very strange use of a colon here, and I'm not quite sure why they were trying to use the colon here or what the purpose was in the sentence. So I would have put brain development in the language department would be better, because I think the colon there is unnecessary. So I think the main issue here for me is when they're using this example of immigrant families. So I think the point is that when families immigrate, the children learn the language faster and so have a higher speaking ability than their parents. I think that's the overall point they're trying to make, but they didn't give me enough detail and they didn't logically explain why they included this example. So one problem a lot of students make is they just give me an example and expect me as the reader to know why they included that example. But what you need to do in your essay is you need to be very explicit and very clear. So you tell me what your point is, you give me your example, and then you need to explain why is this example relevant? Why does this example support your argument? Okay, so like I just explained then, so after that sentence you would say underpinning the point. So you would say, because families immigrate to the country together, but the fact that children often learn the language better than their parents and translate for their families is evidence that it's beneficial to learn a language while you're young. Okay, so then you've gone back and you've explained to me why is this example supporting your argument. Okay, and so then we move to the conclusion. So again, I think this conclusion is a little bit short and could be extended more. When I first look at it, I think 2 lines is not long enough for a conclusion. To sum up, offering an international language at primary school appears to have compelling cons, whereas pros seem neglectful. So I think pros and cons here, again, too informal, okay? You need to be talking about advantages, disadvantages, benefits, or not having benefits, or something, however you need to phrase it. Pros and cons is too informal for your IELTS essay, whereas pros and cons seem neglectable. So I think this is a misuse of a word here. I think what they're trying to say is negligible. Negligible. Which negligible means very small or almost not there. While neglectable has a meaning of you didn't pay attention to something. So neglectable doesn't work in the context of this sentence. So I think what they wanted to say was negligible. So that should be changed for that. Therefore, the advantage cancels out the disadvantage. So again, here at the end, she's saying the advantage of learning a language in primary school is better than the disadvantage. So I would say for this one, you should maybe summarize the points that you made. You said the compelling evidence that you have. So you should add a sentence where you summarize what you talked about in your previous 2 paragraphs. Okay, so that's how you extend your conclusion and show that you've supported the argument, the opinion that you gave me in your introduction. So in your introduction, you should say, this is my opinion, this is what I'll talk about. Then you give me the proof, the evidence in paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and in your conclusion, you're summarizing to prove to me as the reader that your opinion was supported and this is why your opinion is correct. So that needs to be summarized, and you need to extend more. Okay, just generally in the essay overall, to make it clear to me why are the drawbacks, why are the advantages more, okay? So you said here are the disadvantages, here are the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, but you didn't tell me why the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. So that's the main weakness when it comes to task achievement. So if I was scoring this essay, I thought the grammar was pretty good. I would give a 6 for grammar. There weren't so many issues that I couldn't understand the meaning. Again, I would give a 6 for vocabulary because there is an attempt to use some different types of vocabulary. There are a couple of mistakes, but it's because they're trying to use more difficult words. And then my main issue was with coherence and task achievement, where again, I felt that there wasn't enough overall progression. You need to progress the argument more and be consistent in your argument and also explain why. So you remember the question's asking you to evaluate, okay? So you need to judge. The advantages outweigh the disadvantages, okay, but you need to tell me why that happens, and you didn't really do that in the essay, so that would help. So if I was giving advice to this student, so overall I'd probably give it a 6, I guess, because I did think that the grammar and the vocabulary wasn't too bad, but overall I would say to the student that they really need to work on the task achievement, explaining your examples and your reasoning more, and giving me more evidence to make your task achievement and coherence better.